panicked. Thought your heart was going to explode on the airplane coming back. What's Ben missing by being with me and with Sam and missing all that came before?
How's it going? My name is Ben Smith, and thanks so much for stopping by today. I really appreciate it. So I wanted to share my perspective on the whole Myka and Huxley situation. I was adopted from China as a baby by 2 dads and grew up in New York City in what I call a modern family. Yes, like the TV show. And I thought it was important to add my voice to the conversation as an adoptee. I thought it'd be interesting to do it in 2 ways. First, by talking to my dad and learning and exploring about his perspective as an adoptive parent, rather than asking him questions like, what would you do in the whole Myka situation? I wanted to only talk about his lived experiences. So particularly his experiences with the unknowns, the surprises, what it was like in the early years raising me. So that's this interview. And then I'm gonna be releasing a second video tomorrow with my friend Sydney. And Sydney is really cool. She's a Chinese adoptee and she has some really interesting perspective and things to say on this whole situation. And we get definitely a little bit more in depth. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. Feel free to subscribe if you want to be notified about that, which will be released tomorrow. Again, at first I didn't think that I was going to be making this video, but too often adoptee voices are left out of the conversation. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you have any ideas, any thoughts, and hope to see you again here soon. All right, thanks. I just showed Sydney part of this interview with my dad.
My opinion on the video and the interview specifically is that even though Ben and his dad aren't directly talking or relating their situation to the situation of Myka and Huxley and her family, I think inherently the two are connected, because what you're seeing here in this interview is the dynamic being manifested and played out by the adoptive parent and the adoptee. You know, there's always 2 sides to a relationship, and the 2 sides to an adoptive relationship are unique, because you have the parent and then their intentions and why they go into adoption, which Ben addresses. And then on the flip side, you have the way that the parents' decisions will impact the child. People who want to learn more about adoption and the dynamics of adoption and sort of what goes into a parent's choice to adopt and all the sort of phenomena they experience. This is a very good interview to view, because I think Bill is very well spoken, and I think he presents a really good argument and his opinion really nicely. So yeah.
All right, well, that was a much better description than I could have given about this interview. So thanks, Sydney. Sydney and I were going to go and talk about the Myka and Huxley situation ourselves. We're going to be recording some of that, and then we'll show this to you probably after the interview with my dad.
So you will be seeing me again.
Yes. Stay tuned. We are recording. Okay, so I'm here with my dad. I wanted to share a parent perspective on this whole situation with Myka and Huxley and James. I thought it'd be interesting to ask your perspective about the unknowns of adoption, both pre-adoption, picking me up, and then post-adoption. She mentioned that there were lots of unknowns with the adoption process. Some things were not fully transparent. And I'm wondering, first, what made you want to adopt? And then second, what was it like being finally matched with me and knowing that you were going to be able to adopt?
Yeah, good questions. I think I just always wanted to have kids, and I was queer, and it was clear that at that time it was still an issue. So better to go ahead with adoption, and that felt right anyway. It just felt kind of right to kind of, find another individual in the universe that needed a parent, and I needed a kid, and that felt right. But then it is all unknown. I mean, you go through this whole paperwork process. It's very bureaucratic. It's excruciatingly, translations and certifications and more documents and paperwork and getting things done, and it just went on forever. And it's very feels very thin and dry and bureaucratic and frustrating. And then you one day get a picture of someone and told that that's your child. And the first picture we got was of a little girl, because we thought 2 men, it might be easier as queers to kind of raise a little girl.
And did you use an agency or a social worker?
We weren't allowed to use an agency at that time. We used a social worker because to be gay you couldn't go through an agency, and that's changed since then. But at that time we had to go through individuals, and they had to be very careful about what questions to ask and what questions not to ask, and everybody knew the game, so that was cool. But then you get this little picture, and suddenly it begins to kind of feel real and have a little soul in it, and you begin to bond with the picture and fantasize about the picture and wonder about the picture, and then you start thinking there's an individual and I'm an individual, and are we going to be right together, and are they going to love me, and am I going to be good to them, and are they going to be glad to be with me, and is the child going to feel like this was a good thing? And all those human thoughts start coming in, which I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure a birth parent has as well. I've never been a birth parent, but I think it's different in its own way when you're adopting a child, wondering if the child's going to feel that you're the right parent for that child, and that you're glad. And we were American white queers, and you were a child from Asia, a boy, and like maybe you would have rather had a different situation than us. And all those things run through your head. And then when the moment that we met, I mean, it really felt to me like we were two individuals facing off. I mean, you really, you were, I guess, 11 months old, but you felt fully embodied as a presence. And I felt like you faced me off, and it was like, okay, this is a covenant between the two of us. And it's this, I mean, you have to take me and I have to take you, but it's a 50-50 thing. I felt that from you the first time I met you. It was a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting it at all. I thought you'd just be a sweet little blobby baby, And then you have all the thoughts about, like, I mean, you had a couple conditions that
actually, well, going back, you said you got the picture from the social worker. Like, okay, well, this is the picture. This, I'm taking this at face value. There might be things that we don't know about this person.
Yeah, but it's just human to kind of like have a complete fantasy and to completely unfold. We showed everybody the picture, and everybody would say, oh, this, that, what a handsome baby, or oh, this baby looks like that, or look at the eyes. And the picture was this big, and it was black and white. I think it was like nothing. It was like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. But you completely humanize that, and begin to kind of build all the fantasies and all the kind of hopes and dreams that you have as a parent from that little photograph. So yeah, a lot of expectations. You just have to kind of believe in magic a little bit.
So when you first got to China, is that when you first felt like you were a father? When did the weight of that hit you?
It didn't hit me because when we first met, you and I, it was like maybe 11 in the morning, and you were handed to me, and then we were surrounded by all these people, caseworkers, social workers, bureaucrats, the people who were traveling with me, your nurse. We all went out to a banquet in Chinese style. We celebrated. And then finally, about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, you and I were alone together in my hotel, and you had pretty much been squalling for 5 hours. You knew something was up, and you were making your voice heard you were sort of bearing witness to this moment. You were not complacent in any way. You were sort of making your presence known. And I had never had a kid before, and you were screaming. And I thought, So we came back, and we went to the hotel, and it was a quiet afternoon. I think it was raining. We closed the door of the room. It was just you and me, and we got down on the rug together, and that's when I started feeling bonded. That's when that all began. So that was for me the unfolding, and I think we were alone together then for 3 days with nobody else. And in that period, I felt like you began to understand and make a bond. And when you first came, you would tuck your lip under like this, a security thing, and you would go around. You'd hold my shirt very tightly and hold my shoulder like this, and always look forward. You never looked behind you the way babies did. You always looked forward. And we'd all joke about you were like a little bird in a crow's nest of a big ship, and you always wanted to see what was going on. You wanted to be in control.
Yeah, and still do.
Well, it took a long time. I mean, gradually you kind of like became more of a baby, but initially you were taking care of yourself. And always had that lip sort of in the sort of defensive security position, and always looking forward, clutching.
And then what was it like bringing me back to New York, meeting my other dad, meeting the family, and what were people saying about you adopting a child from China?
Well, then it becomes the real life thing. By that time, I'd been with you for a week and a half or 2 weeks, and I felt very much that I was the person, your parent. I mean, I was responsible for you. You were my kid, and I was introducing you to the bigger world, and people were embracing you, and then it begins to kind of cascade and kind of like build around you, and the whole support system begins to grow. But there are always moments in any kid's life where they wonder, have I got the right parent? Is this the right family for me? What else might have been for me? And I think those echo differently for a kid that's adopted than for a birth kid. In
Right.
some ways maybe better. In some ways not better. In all ways different. But I was saying that I remember my best friend's mother, who'd had 4 children, and she had a couple special needs kids, and she was a super mother, and she said, she couldn't imagine having a child. She couldn't imagine the loss for you of being away from whoever had carried you in their womb, and you'd heard their voice for 9 months, and that had been your whole world, and that she always felt a special connection with the children from that. And that really struck me, because I thought, oh, what's Ben missing by being with me and with Sam and missing all that came before?
How did you reckon with the complex of being the savior that's going to China, adopting?
That never was part of my scenario. I mean, I knew that I selfishly wanted to be part of a family. I was aware of the fact that I didn't take a foster kid in America that was closer to my world, that had maybe a higher need. I mean, you were a Chinese boy, you were probably going to be adopted by anybody in a snap. I mean, I had to make a decision about whether to have a white surrogate kid, a foster kid, a black kid, a Latino kid, a kid from Russia, like anything. And then those were all complex decisions. I mean, my politics might have led me in a different direction of taking a kid that had a higher need than you did for a family. I mean, a 7 to 15-year-old, American kid living in a foster home or institution was maybe a greater kindness to the world than a very cute little Asian boy. So I didn't feel like I was saving the world. I felt like I had made a selfish choice for myself. I was pretty aware of not having made a hard choice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess in the 90s at that time, adoption from China was more readily available.
I mean, it wasn't a politically progressive do-good action. It was a self-serving, thing that we all wanted to do for ourselves for the most part. I mean, there were other ways. I mean, there's judgment around surrogacy. There's judgment around, adoption from China. The kids from China were thought to be better in health. But it didn't feel like a savior act at all. It felt like a very carefully matriculated decision that was going to fit my lifestyle. But I think this whole issue of the emotional cord about being an adoptive parent and the adopted kid, and it's one thing if you're flesh and blood and you're born together and you've got flesh and blood. It's another thing if you're 2 people in the universe or 3 people in the universe, or however many people in the universe that come together in some way. You can't help but feel the hand of fate in that, and the hand of fate is different than the hand of biology, and in some ways it has much more resonance. For me, it did. I think it can have as certainly as much resonance as flesh and blood, and in some ways more. And it's always been funny in my family, because I feel like in some ways you and I have more the same character than many of my nieces and nephews have with their parents, or with the traditions in my family, having to do with spirit and energy and these sorts of things. So I don't know. But it's a mystery, and
Right.
and like all things in life, it's a mystery. I mean, you can't really explain it. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's all projection. Who knows?
Were there any other challenges in the first few years of me being in the U.S. and me being in my new family?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, jump ahead 5 years, you were a very sporty little kid. You were kind of a jock kid, and I was a sissy, and I thought I was going to have a kid that was going to want to watercolor and, kind of like look out at the stars at night and stuff, and you were never interested in any of that stuff. You were an artistic, creative kid, but you were definitely, the imprint. Who knows if it would have been any different biologically, but you did have health conditions, and that was a surprise.
When I got back to New York, is the first thing that you do that week bring me to a doctor?
Yeah, pretty quickly. And you were too young to have the surgery you needed at that time, but they scheduled it for...
What did you think when the doctor said, oh, he has this heart condition, he has a hole in his heart?
We learned that in China.
Were you scared?
Panicked. Thought your heart was going to explode on the airplane coming back. Not panicked the whole time. I watched plenty of movies and had, read books and had a fun time.
Were they reassuring you that it was a somewhat standard operation, or?
It was clear at that point that the reason you had, and this is anecdotal, but that you had been a boy, which was unusual to be adopted out of China. I think you probably were one of the first or only boys ever up to that time that had been adopted out.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was clear that the reason then was because you had this medical condition and the family wasn't able to do anything about it in China, but that if an American family would likely be able to help you.
Well, unconfirmed, but yeah, that's anecdotal.
Supposedly.
Yeah. Getting back to the States, did you know if insurance would cover that operation?
That all stuff. We were living in New York, and that all stuff was clickety click. It was.
Okay.
That was going to be taken care of. It didn't mean that it wasn't frightening and we weren't scared, but it was clear that we could solve that problem. And in that way, that was another bond. Thinking, okay, because you're always thinking, gee, I hope this baby's lucky to be with me. I hope this was the right baby for me. Because you do wonder, am I the right kid for this parent? I mean, is this? The kid could have had anybody in the world. Were they lucky to get me?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a couple friends told me one time that she thought it was I had no business adopting a child without giving the child a mother. I was quite shocked.
Mm-hmm.
There were just all a million things that any parent wonders about, like, am I the right parent for this child?
Right. What would you tell prospective parents these days if they're considering adoption, if they're considering starting or adding to their family? What would you tell them to think and feel?
I'd just keep moving forward, because it's hard to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
The thought is there, the genesis, the seed is there in so many people, and it's such a gift if you can see it through, but it's hard to get there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're pregnant, it's biological, time is going to give you whatever time gives you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing it through paperwork and through an adoption process, you have to always be mustering up your own initiative to take the next step, and people fall back, and a lot of people start it and never complete it, and it's hard work psychologically. It's very hard. So just keep taking the next step, always be in play, always keep it moving, and then trust fate and trust your own ability to love.
Yeah. Just say he's okay.
All right, so that's the video. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Consider subscribing and let me know what you think in the comments below. And then also feel free to check out the video that I made with Sydney. So I think that's it for now. Thanks so much, and hope that you have a great day. How do you think you'd feel if you were in Huxley's position?
I think I would feel very traumatized.
How do you think the complex of abandonment has affected your life?
That's a good question, Ben. I think specifically it's impacted my ability to trust people. And specifically in the sense of I'm always afraid that when I get close with somebody that they're going to leave.